Chris here is the author of The Broken Line. Now, Chris, this is where
Yeah.
startups and finance collide.
Yep.
It says
That's
so right
true.
on the cover of the book.
I did that so I would remember.
That's a good strategy. I like that about you, Chris. I like that about you.
Hey, you got to keep it simple, my friend.
Laughter dances with truth in mostly fictional tales, where reality and fantasy engage in a tango. Our guest today on Mostly Fictional Tales is someone who is turning algae into a powerhouse for the planet, Chris Schuring. From lumberjacking roots to pioneering green technology, Chris has dedicated his life to solving environmental challenges. He's developed algae bioreactors that do double duty, capturing carbon emissions and producing high-grade algae for the nutraceutical market. But the journey hasn't been easy, and Chris has faced the harsh realities of scaling innovations in an unforgiving marketplace. Along the way, he's learned a thing or two about science, entrepreneurship, and the delicate balance between industry and nature. Join us as we explore the surprising connections between algae, sustainability, and the future of our civilization. Folks, this is why I think Chris is somebody that you and I needed to sit down and have a conversation. Well, I'm going to have a conversation with him. You're going to all just follow along, and you're going to like it. I
Follow the
hope.
bouncing ball, as it were.
I'd like to be a lot more confident about that, but I am fairly sure you're going to like this. Chris here is the author of The Broken Line. Now, Chris, this is where
Yeah.
startups and finance collide.
Yep.
It says
That's
so right
true.
on the cover of the book.
I did that so I would remember.
That's a good strategy. I like that about you, Chris. I like that about you.
Hey, you got to keep it simple, my friend.
Okay, so let's just start with the top line here. When did you finish this book? This was recent.
I just finished it last month, and it was work in progress for a couple of years, and
How's
I decided that it was time to get it published.
how's it feel to get it over the edge?
You know, I am very excited about it. I've wanted to be a published author for decades and procrastinated on it many, many times, and I just got this one done, and it's now up on Amazon and doing quite well, actually.
There are brighter days in the future going forward. That is something I sincerely hope. I sincerely hope.
Yeah,
I don't know if we discussed this before, Chris, but
right.
I'm a technological futurist. I'm
Okay.
optimistic about the future because I see the products of human ingenuity being
Right.
pointed at really tough problems that are sometimes of our own making, which I think is a good segue into something that you and I chatted about briefly, which was bioreactors and carbon
Right.
sequestration.
Yeah. Well, I am also a futurist, but sometimes I lose people because I'm really far out in the future. I'm not talking 3 or 4 years. I'm 10 years out in the future. So, we look at from a technological point of view, those things that may take 3 or 4 years to build. So we need to look 10 years down the road for them to be operational.
Yeah,
But I'm always looking at what's new and exciting in innovation and in technology. Um, that's what led me to patent and design the world's largest closed loop photobioreactor growing algae for the purposes of carbon sequestration from power plants.
I'm liking this idea on many levels. One,
Mhm.
it's kind of like the thing that we as a civilization take the natural processes that are in the world,
Right.
and that
Right.
when we make them the most ideal of conditions, it does a sincere amount of work that we would otherwise have to do in a very different and costly way. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Like carbon sequestration. What if you could just take the carbon dioxide off of a coal generator, and
Right.
feed it on site to a bunch of algae, and as a side product, make something that cows could eat.
Well, and we did that, and the challenge is that when you take the stack, we call it stack gas, off of a bio reactor or any kind of biomass or coal-fired power plant, the challenge with that stack gas is it has heavy metals and
Oh,
bad stuff in
oh,
it. So what you
mm,
do with that
I
is you don't feed it to cows because then you get crazy cows.
okay, yeah, yeah, okay. When you said heavy
Just
metals, I'm all
you know,
going, oh, this is going to be like a bioaccumulator. We're not going to be able to use this to feed cows off of.
no. But what
Um,
you do is there's a couple 100,000 kinds of algae in the world. So you pick an algae in that scenario, you pick an algae that has a high oil content.
hmm.
And when you do that, you take the algae and squeeze the life out of it.
They won't
Uh,
mind. They'll make more algae.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you take the oil and you take the oil and make biofuels out of it or diesel. And you take that diesel and use it in the local tractors and those kinds of things on site. So you can actually use it. And then you can take the dried algae after you've squeezed all of the oil out of it, and you could burn it back in the coal-fired power plant
Mm.
or the biomass plant.
And as you said, it's a closed loop. So even if you're
That's right.
reburning it, it's going to get stack gas is going to get funneled through. This is all transparent pipe, right? So the
Yeah, it
sunlight can
is.
get at the algae.
Correct. And so what what I developed, what it looks like a large radiator with 4-inch clear pipe. Carbon is going to be carbon fiber pipe, clear, so it wouldn't discolor. Problem with other plexiglasses and so forth, it discolors over time
Oh, they hit
and gets brittle.
UV, like ultraviolet
Right.
light goes through and reacts with the polymerase or something like that, right?
Correct. Correct. And then I put them up in a radiator type of scenario that was 32 feet tall and 40 feet long, and that created, and we did what we call blades, much like five blades in a radiator, and we cycled algae and water and nutrients and fed it carbon dioxide through that radiator type scenario, and then harvested the algae when it was mature. Depends upon the algae. You can get algae to mature in 5 days, 6 days, 10
No,
days,
that's
whatever.
fast.
It really depends upon the algae species. To give you an idea, algae from a uh, critter perspective, if you will, uh, takes the form of kelp in the ocean,
Yeah.
but it also also can take the form of on the underside rocks in the Mojave Desert. If you turn over some of the rocks, you'll find algae that grows underneath the rock because it's growing because the dew from the morning collects on the rock and then rolls across and ends up at the bottom of the rock and grows algae. All the way from that to people probably have seen pictures of in Antarctica, the ice shelf that's got either a red or a crimson color.
The blood
Uh,
falls. The blood
get,
falls. Yeah.
get, yeah, that's actually iron and algae. So it grows in that type of temperature, and then
It collects up a
there was a
little bit
point.
of iron oxide and
Right,
stores it away, and then it dies somewhere else, and the iron oxide just is out there as the leftovers.
right. So it's in that type of temperature, and then there's an algae that was discovered probably 20 years ago that was very high in oil content that actually grew in the hot sulfur springs in Yellowstone at
Okay.
over 200 degrees. So the algae uh, is in a very wide spectrum.
They take
You know,
advantage of a lot of different ecological niches, is
right.
what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, and so it's like a lot of things in this life. You take a look at what best tools serve my purpose, and you utilize those tools. And algae is one of those tools. And there's also an algae that they grow that people don't really realize that is a precursor on heart drugs.
Oh,
And a precursor is something that says if I take this and it's wrapped in a precursor, my body will actually make it soluble so it is effective. And that,
is this similar? Like you could say flour, wheat flour
right,
is the precursor for bread,
that's
right?
correct. That's
Okay.
correct. And the precursor for this heart drug is derived from an enzyme that's found in a particular type of algae that sells for $300,000 an ounce.
Whoa, 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 whoa! Three hundred
So it takes,
thousand for that algae.
uh, for the enzyme that
Oh,
comes from the algae.
okay, because there's not a lot of it, and so you kind of have to concentrate it
It
in
takes a
order to
couple
get it into
tons.
usable concentrations. Is what you're saying, right?
Takes a couple tons. People takes a couple tons of algae to get a couple ounces of enzymes.
Okay.
So there's a huge, you look at what is. I consult with businesses all the time, and I ask them, "What is your end goal? Why are you doing what you're doing? And what tools are you using to utilize the pathways to get to where you want to go?" Algae is no different. I've been out of the algae market for some time,
Okay.
but algae. So here's one for you. For the ladies and others who are listening out there, if you use orange organic makeup, right?
Yep. Yep.
Whether it's lipstick, foundation, whatever, but it's orange and it's organic, that comes from beta carotene.
Okay.
The beta carotene predominantly, not 100%, but predominantly is raised in a kibbutz in Israel,
Hmm.
dried, and sent by the ton to Japan, and Japan turns it into makeup.
Oh, okay.
It's
So,
out,
and
it's
they raise
green
it from an
algae.
algae, an orange algae. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. That's correct. And then it's raised predominantly. It's raised by one company. 85% of the world's supply of beta carotene from cosmetics comes from one location in Israel.
This must be. This is interesting because beta carotene is something that I think of as what makes carrots orange, right?
That's exactly what it is. But
Oh,
the
okay.
problem is that it takes too many carrots to derive the beta carotene
Oh.
substance, right?
So
To be able to do makeup.
the
Correct.
concentration in a carrot, while it's enough to be visible, is not as much as the algae that you can grow and
Correct.
get the pure beta carotene
Correct.
from the algae.
And it's still beta carotene, but the beta carotene from the algae is more. I don't like using the term, but I'm going to call it pharmaceutical grade
Okay, yeah,
than a carrot is.
yeah,
It
yeah.
would be called nutraceutical.
Okay,
So it's a nutraceutical grade version of beta carotene, whereas carrots are an agricultural grade,
okay,
not as soluble. The chains are bigger, that kind of stuff. So
okay.
it's not as easily manipulable,
Yeah.
malleable. I'm going to use a bunch of words I don't know what they mean,
Well, you know
but
what? You're
into
in good
cosmetics.
company. You're in good company if I do say so myself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So that's algae. It's very cool. They use algae in things like thickeners for ice cream. There's an algae that's called um, that is used for macular degeneration. It's called astaxanthin. Sells for about probably $300,000 a ton,
Okay.
and it's used
A
for
ton's
macular
a lot.
degeneration.
A ton is a
It's
lot.
red. It is. It's most of that kind of algae is sold in kilo boxes.
Okay. So you're
The
not going to
other
have
biggest,
to write a check for 300,000. You can get a smaller amount.
yeah, yeah, but nobody buys a smaller amount because you need a lot to do
It's a
something.
material.
Yeah,
it's your base material going on in. So
right,
with your carbon with stack gas and whatnot.
right. Hmm.
So you're not. You're an author right now, and we're going to get to the other things that you do as well. But you're not actively in that business at this point. Did you end up having
No.
handing it off to somebody who was excited about it? What's the story with that?
Well, what happened was there was a worldwide agreement called the Kyoto Protocol,
Okay, I remember that. Yeah.
and the Kyoto Protocol was a policy protocol, if you will, and it said that the large polluting countries in the world needed to reduce their carbon footprint, and they were going to pay fines and all these other kinds of things. And it wasn't really all that hospitable of a deal, way above my pay grade. But that was, so we operated when we first started under the Kyoto Protocol, raised money because the Kyoto Protocol would force companies to sequester their carbon.
Okay.
Well, when they didn't sign, when the US, China, and India did not sign the Kyoto Protocol, the investment for carbon capture and storage industries across the board ceased to exist.
Because there is now no longer going to be a business line item mandated by law that you all had to, for example, like an item that car manufacturers have to put on a car is a catalytic converter. That, if you had to justify that catalytic converter without a law, it's expensive because there's platinum in a catalytic converter. It's not exactly cheap, and it's something that only goes on a car because we force ourselves to do it because it's a good idea, even if it's extra steps.
Correct. Now, what we were doing in algae, we could have turned our attention when the funding dried up. We could have turned our attention to the nutraceutical market, because the nutraceutical market is very lucrative and a way to make a lot of money. But the challenge with the nutraceutical market, as a startup company, it's very difficult to break into.
Okay, you kind of have to have material to sell, but in order to get material to sell, you need capital to build the generators and time to grow the algae and the centrifuge it and concentrate it and get it so that you can have the material to hand over to the customer. And
the way the algae market works, just to give you an idea, in nutraceuticals, if I went to somebody who was using astaxanthin, by the way, they also use astaxanthin to color salmon.
Okay.
Just as a side note, the reason why salmon is pink is the same reason why flamingos are pink.
Oh, okay. Flamingos like eat some sort of crustacean that they like, that make
and krill.
Yeah.
So a salmon out in the ocean eats krill, and krill eats,
and they don't have color,
plankton,
right?
And plankton eats astaxanthin algae. And when astaxanthin algae is green, it's green, but when it stresses, it turns red. And when the salmons eat it via eating plankton and other things in the ocean, it turns their flesh pink.
Okay.
And when you raise salmon in a farm,
you don't get the pink.
Salmon looks like a carp. It's gray.
All right. That's not not very exciting.
No, and there's two ways you can tell a farm-raised salmon is it doesn't have very much fat in it because it's not in cold temperatures.
Yeah, you're going to have a taste difference from the fat content right there, yeah.
And they're using either synthetic pellets or some other red food coloring to actually color the flesh of the salmon. Now, the expensive guys will use astaxanthin in the pellets to color the salmon, but they still won't taste as good as ocean-bred, ocean-raised salmon because they don't experience the cold temperatures, which creates more vitamin E.
Okay.
It's a long story. I know way too much about it. But
no, that's kind of like the interesting story about that I find those details to be really fascinating because many folks will look at green technologies and they will have heard about these things 10 years ago and then they'll wonder, well, why didn't that ever work? Why don't we have algae at every coal plant? Well, you're telling me basically the legal reason to make sure that somebody would be interested in buying your product and your system suddenly went away.
That's correct.
Even if it's a good idea, it now no longer has the financial impetus to make it happen.
Correct. And then if I go to somebody who's buying astaxanthin, let's say, and we say we're going to sell it to them, the challenge is they've already got a distributor for it.
So they've already
So
got a
they're
source, some established
correct.
kibbutz in Israel that's got where they're growing the stuff.
Correct. And they're buying 100% of their supply.
Okay.
So, and it's because the supply is limited. So some of the algae are very difficult to grow. So, case in point, astaxanthin is very difficult to grow. And so whoever's growing it is selling 100% of their supply and can sell 200% if they actually made more, right? So there's a demand on the market. That's why it's so expensive. There's a demand on the market.
But
so if I start growing it, I go to somebody and say, buy my astaxanthin, and they start buying my astaxanthin and I fail, let's say I can't get the quantity or the consistency is not right or it doesn't assay correctly and those kinds of things.
Okay.
They can't go back to their previous supplier because their previous supplier is now selling it to somebody else.
Okay, and because 100% is going out the door. And so
That's
people
correct.
who consume this as an ingredient have to worry about the knock-on effect of, okay, we'll try a different supply source, but if it doesn't work out, we're screwed.
That's correct. And you can put people out of business doing that. And there's ways to get around that, but again, that takes money.
Okay.
And the money wasn't flowing. So from there, I started a solar energy company, and we went into doing microgrids for the feed-in tariff programs for the state of California.
Okay, well, there was money for that.
Yeah. Yep. So that was algae. It was a lot of fun, but I'll maybe get back into it another day. I actually had somebody ask me the other day if I wanted to get back into algae, and I said, not unless you got $5 million to lend me, I'm not going to do it.
I think we need to talk a little bit more about that. But folks, first, let's check. Chris, you've got a little bit more time tonight to chatter with me. Folks, if you like what we do here on Mostly Fictional Tales, which is to have a deep kind of rambling conversation here about technology, then there's a few things that you can do to ensure that we keep doing this. I need you to like, I need you to share, I need you to subscribe to the channel. I know it sounds like, oh my gosh, how can that help? Well, YouTube will reward that. But if you're a real difference maker, I need you to head over onto Patreon and send me some ducats that way. I cannot do this show without you. And until next time, which I will bring this on back for next time, I have been your Captain Rathgar, and this has been Chris Schuring, and I advise you, in the meantime, that you be good. But if you cannot be good, don't be caught.
Or just be great.
That's right. You be great.